So good day to each and everyone. Today we're going to tackle about the revised Bloom's taxonomy, which is an idea of a consecutive process. So when we say consecutive process, it is somewhat a sequence process without any interruption. So mura siyang domino effect. So if we put this in a learning process, it's like before applying a concept in real life situation or a scenario, we must understand it. And before we understand it, we must remember the related facts or the facts related to it, right? But before we delve into our main topic, let me give you a short background of who introduced the Bloom's taxonomy. So his name is Benjamin Bloom, and he was born February 21, 1913 and died September 13, 1999. He is an American educational psychologist and also an associate director of the board of the examination in the University of Chicago. So Benjamin Bloom's was the one who introduced the Bloom's taxonomy. So the Bloom's taxonomy, there is two versions of this taxonomy: the original Bloom's taxonomy and the revised taxonomy. So if you see in the picture, there is a version of Bloom's taxonomy were created 1956. It is the evaluation, synthesis, analysis, application, comprehension, and knowledge. It is in a noun form, right? If you will notice. And in 2001, it became a create, evaluate, analyze, apply, and understand. Also remember. So it is in a verb form. That's the difference between the original and the revised. So it became in a verb form as the author recommend reading the name of each learning category as preceded by the phrases the student or employee is able to remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Additionally, it became in a verb form as it is emphasizing the active process involved in learning rather than just acquiring knowledge. So meaning, if we say an active process, of course, it is, or like mahitabo siya, ana mismo na time. Like, it's an active process. Like, if I teach you, then you will receive an information. Something like that. So in the graphic organizer summary, revised Bloom's taxonomy, they compare the old taxonomy and the revised taxonomy. So in old taxonomy, it is the knowledge, as I've mentioned earlier, the knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. As in the revised Bloom's taxonomy, we have the two dimension, which is the cognitive dimension and the knowledge dimension. So my focus is the cognitive dimension, which is the remembering, understanding, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So the first stage is the remembering. So if we put this together, a set of students were able to have a deep understanding to a certain topic. Like for instance, so in remembering, the students recall the basic rule of subject-verb agreement. The second one is understanding. The understanding, the students explain why subject-verb agreement matters. The third one is applying. In applying, the students practice applying the rule in the sentences. So next is the analyzing. In the analyzing, the students identify and correct the errors in the subject-verb agreement. In next one is the evaluating. The students evaluate and justify why the sentences are correct or incorrect using the subject-verb agreement. Lastly is creating. The students use their knowledge of the subject-verb agreement to compose their original work. So something like that. It's a process from level 1 until level 6, which is the create or the creating. It is important for us to understand the use of this revised Bloom's taxonomy, especially to us, the future educators, because it helps us to design an activity that promotes the critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity of the students. It helps us to guide the students until they reach their full potential in creating, in using their knowledge into a real life situation. So the second dimension, which is the knowledge dimension, which will discuss by my co-reporter, Miss Jessa Reyes.
Let's continue the discussion. So here is Bloom's revised taxonomy. So it helps us understand how knowledge is acquired and applied. It consists of two dimensions, which is the knowledge dimension and the cognitive process dimension. So let's discuss first with the knowledge dimension. So, the knowledge dimension classifies the types of knowledge students acquire. It answers the questions, what are we learning? So, in this dimension, there are four main types, which is the factual knowledge, the conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognitive knowledge. Factual knowledge consists of the basic facts, data, and terminology that students must memorize or recall in order to understand the subject. It is the foundation of learning because students cannot analyze or apply knowledge without first knowing the basic facts. So we have the examples here, which is knowing the names of world capitals, memorizing mathematical formulas, and learning the definitions of literary terms such as metaphor or simile. So next is the conceptual knowledge. Conceptual knowledge involves understanding the relationships between different pieces of information and how they fit together into a bigger picture. It is deeper than the factual knowledge because it is focuses on the meaning, relationships, and classification. So, my examples here is understanding the cause and effect between industrialization and climate change, explaining how and why different economic systems, which is the capitalism and socialism, function, recognizing the structure of a story, which is the plot, characters, settings, conflict, and resolution. And the third one is the procedural knowledge. So, procedural knowledge is knowing how to perform a task, follow a method, or apply a set of steps to complete an action. So, this type of knowledge is essential for problem solving, skill building, and applying theories in practice. So, examples are knowing how to solve a quadratic equation step by step, understanding how to write a research paper using proper formatting, and learning how to conduct a scientific experiment using proper procedures. And lastly, the metacognitive knowledge. It is an awareness and understanding of one's own thoughts or processes. It helps students monitor their learning, recognize the strengths and weaknesses, and develop strategies for improving their study habits. So I also prepare examples which are knowing which study techniques work best for you, recognizing when you need extra help with a subject, and reflecting on past mistakes and adjusting learning strategies. Let's move on with the second dimension, which is the cognitive process dimension. So, cognitive process dimension refers to how students engage with knowledge, from simply remembering facts to creating new ideas. So we have here remembering. So remembering talks about the basic recall. So remembering is also the lowest level of thinking according to Bloom's taxonomy. So it involves retrieving facts, definitions, and simple information. So examples here is naming the seven continents. So how will you name the seven continents without if you don't remember it? So that is remembering. And next is understanding. So it explains and making sense of information. So it involves interpreting, summarizing, and explaining information in one's own words. So example is summarizing the main idea of a poem. And next is applying or using knowledge in real world situations. So it involves putting knowledge into action to solve problems or complete tasks. Example is using a mathematical formula to solve a real world problem. So next is analyzing. It talks about breaking down information into parts to understand it better. So it involves examining the relationships between concepts and identifying patterns. So example here is comparing and contrasting two political systems. So it improved by using graphic organizers, ask different questions and categorize information. Then next is evaluating or making judgments based on criteria and evidence. So it involves assessing the quality, credibility, or effectiveness of an idea. So our example here is kind of evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of an argument. So lastly, creating, generating new ideas. So it is the highest level of thinking according to Bloom's taxonomy. So it involves designing, inventing, or producing something original.